Well, hello everyone. So, I just got back a little bit ago from this year's reboot of Master Universe. There's the latest theatrical outing for the He-Man franchise, the first live-action one in nearly 40 years, and I gotta say, hey, it is probably, to date, the best theatrical outing they've done, with director Travis Knight, whose other credits include Coven Two Strains and Bumblebee, both movies I talked about and enjoyed previously. He showing a lot of reference to material, which every bit is tongue in cheek, and also quite entertaining. So, if you are familiar with this franchise, then it's definitely a real treat. And if you aren't, then this is actually a good place to start, if I'm being completely honest. So let's begin. The movie is a sort of reimagined take on the franchise origin story, in which it's Adam, Prince of Eternia, who has been and was forced to flee Eternia as a child. Hailed ended up working in in human resources as a young adult. After recovering his magic sword in a collectible and comic store of all places, as he must return into his home to not only save his kingdom but also take his rightful place on the throne. So, much like in the past incarnation of the franchise, definitely shares a lot of DNA with not just the most famous tale, sword and sorcery. You have King Arthur and Excalibur, but also its contemporaries such as Star Wars and Conan the Barbarian. In fact, it's actually pretty well documented that early on in the testing phase for the actual figurines, and Adam wasn't just going to be like Conan, he was actually going to be Conan at one point, man. And even though I'm no Conan fan, admittedly, he, I certainly fit the profile of a second generation MOTU fan. Man, because let's face it, at this point in culture history, the Venn diagram between middle aged fantasy fans, hi, and the 6 to 11 key male demo was basically a circle for this franchise. I mean, where definitely, and there's a lot of, they've been trying to get this made for a long time. I'm naturally MGM and Amazon were not the first people to attach their projects, but they definitely seem to make it work. Her throwing their vast money and resource behind it, and it's definitely kind of like the inverse of the other adaptation I covered previously, earlier in the week, where they're being over 140 minutes runtime. It follows what I would call the 20-20-100 rule, where you spend the first 20 minutes on the Sun Eternia. The next 20 minutes are showing Adam on Earth, and the remaining 100 minutes he goes back to Eternia to save his home and face off against his enemies led by Skeletor. And when I first heard they're actually really making progress on this version, I insinuated all they had to do is make Thor Ragnarok again, and I ended up not being that far off. I mean, the casting is quite solid, not just for experienced performers, much as Idris Elba's as Man at Arms, but also at relatively fresh faces, Nicholas Gallett's scene in the lead role. I've not seen the show he was on. I had to read the book first to make sure I understand it, but I will say he fits the profile and does look good with his shirt off, especially. He, and you're not going to see too much beneath that leather kilt, because it's a PG-13. They're trying to keep it on this couple thousand screens. I mean, yeah. And having said that, the approach material is very tongue-in-cheek, which was basically another thing I was following as they're making progress over the years, being whether or not they're going to lay into the more serious aspects of the franchise or really all go all on the absurdity. I think they reached a nice comfortable medium here where they poke fun at how a lot of the names of the both the heroes and the antagonists would sound like someone cooked up by a 10-year-old kid dueling only in his bedroom. Um, but when serious situations on screen, like the siege of Eternity at the beginning, it's treated as such. Which I think is definitely a nice spot we're in at this point in pop culture history, where these are quite dramatic times, but also very weird times. Therefore, they call for very weird and often dramatic entertainments. And I'm not gonna lie, even the product placements didn't really bother me too much. Much like using the coke he was drinking as an analogy for his magic sword, or naturally the prime truck that's seen as Beastman's on a rampage. And yes, they do indeed find a way to work in the medic for ambulance song in a way that makes sense. And it's like where I guess the deflection will be what's going on when a couple of cops are just dealing with what's supposed to be like a routine burglary, a call, and instead they find Beastman rampaging through Oklahoma City, which I also. And even though some people are skeptical about Jared Leto as Skeletor, I maintain that he has more the quality to play a villain, and he'll put his own spin on the character's roasts. While also paying homage to past versions, like a roast master universe, you might say. Hey, and some of the insults he has for both his enemies and even his own henchmen that are actually almost ripped straight from the cartoons from years past. And especially, and even looking back, because I was introduced to friends for the 2002 version of the show, which aired on Toonami's Saturday morning entertainment system, I believe. I can maintain that Adam is very much cut to the same cloth as the likes of Goku and all these mecha pilots. So, and likewise, they were just looking for who they could get for the crew either. They're looking for people who they knew they were good, and gotta say that cinematography being Wagner was a perfect choice, is for or trying to capture the outlandish landscapes of Eternia, both the hero's home across Lake Grayskull and Skeletor's lair on Snake Mountain. As performances, as again, they're definitely relishing how absurd the ideas. Like Alison Brie is definitely enjoying herself as Evil Lynn, as one would imagine, and also enjoy the fun ways to sneak in cameos from previous incarnations. I won't explain which ones here, which give an idea of how amused I found them. Naturally, I'm not the only one who had this kind of enthusiasm for the project. I mean, even looking back, like I find at the original version of '83, finding so many alumni that worked on things I've familiar with, like Haim Saban, who even brought Haim back to contribute music to this movie. He who later played a large part in the Power Rangers franchise and bringing Digimon to the United States. It's Paul Dini, future co-creator of DC Animated Universe, and J. Michael Straczynski, who, even though he didn't have the highest opinion of his work on the show, who still was able to use that as a stepping stone to everything from Spider-Man comics to Babylon 5. So, that's the top of my head right there. Likewise, especially like Daniel Pemberton's score, lots of orchestral music, as well as lots of very 80s thrash metal and synths. Especially like the contributions from Brian May of Queen fame as well, even to the point of using Prince of the Universe from Highlander, another one they've got access to and are working on rebooting, which they even lampshade during the aforementioned and seeing where Beastman is on a rampage through Oklahoma City. Yeah. And As for what it means for any future endeavors for Mattel, I cannot say right now for certain. And I can definitely say the response being actually relatively positive. Have it's currently certified fresh, and most people I've fielded feedback from online seem to really enjoy it. Just being only a burst of optimism in a year where we really use some, where especially like the idea of actually exploring what a character of like He-Man is in the year of our Super Mario Galaxy 2026 X, and the way they find answers to get that question in the movie, especially the idea that strength is not merely the absence of weakness, but rather using it to build into strength. I mean, even his background in HR actually is nice way of remixing some of the little PSAs I have at the end of each episode, including some of the ones I watched on Prime. When I was waiting for this to come out, and also I really do incorporate a lot of things from the source material in ways that actually make a weird kind of sense for this new continuity, including like the hot pink shirt as part of his civvies mean, as well as how no one can recognize him even when he shapeshifts. Well, much like Clark Kent's eyeglasses or the Ninja Turtles, those hats and trench coats, sometimes this way hides in plain sight. Yeah. So I don't expect it to do Mario or Barbie level numbers by any means, but if it manages to get solid eggs, eggs going, it could at least be like won't be a sleeper and even a new franchise. Guys, again, I won't say how, but there's definitely like nice little bits for longtime fans. One last thing. Of the new characters introduced for this movie, and by proxy, new toys on the shelf, I particularly liked Roboto, who was a Kristen Wiig, a Horde battle soldier slash janitor, who doesn't matter whether it's someone getting too deep into their flask or some enemy soldiers. If there's a mess around, she's definitely going to be able to clean it up. I mean, I'm always a one. So, my final rating is a powerful 4 stars out of 5, 3 stars out of 4. And this adaptation certainly has the power. I will see you all again very soon, so take care, everyone. Mm-hmm.